This is Play-by-Playcast.
Is that faster than a Greyhound?
The podcast about play-by-play guys. For play-by-play guys, by, I'm told, a play-by-play guy.
It's a bold strategy, Cotton. Let's see if it pays off for him.
Now here's the host of Play-by-Playcast, Tom Bodett. Wait, the Motel 6 guy?
We'll leave the light on for you.
No, Joel Godet.
Joe Godet.
Joel.
Joel?
Joel, with an L.
Okay, here's your host, Joel Godet.
Don't worry, nobody's listening anyway.
All right, away we go. It's almost 1 o'clock in the morning here on Friday, the day this podcast gets released, and we're recording it. My name is Joel Godet. Thanks as always for clicking subscribe or download and joining us once again here on iTunes or on Stitcher, where you can find PxPCast. You can also find us on Twitter at PxPCast, or I am on Twitter at Joel Godet, JoelGodett. Late night tonight, the official start of midweek Maction across college football. Ball State hosting Toledo tonight at home. Midweek football. It's October. I don't have another football broadcast on a Saturday for the rest of the season. Sometimes it gets nice, sometimes it gets a little hectic. But it's part of the fun of being a broadcaster in the Mid-American Conference. Not an easy one to call tonight. Ball State falling, allowing 50 points or more for the third time in 4 games. The Cardinals beat 58-17, I believe, off the top of my head. It's been a challenge, and it's been interesting as a broadcaster to be in the spot that Rich Spizak and myself, my partner Rich and I, have been in over the last month, where Ball State has really struggled a lot. Is playing 26 freshmen, by far the most in FBS college football this season, and freshmen at some really important roles, including at quarterback tonight, where Ball State was down to its 4th string quarterback. Starter was injured after week 3. The backup was injured last week. The 3rd string was injured on the 2nd series tonight as I record this, and then the 4th string, a redshirt freshman, played the rest of the night, and I guess from the news reports is likely to start next week as well. So it's been an interesting challenge in terms of, it's easy to go out there and just be upset and frustrated and mope on the radio about the team getting beat and some young guys giving up some deep plays on defense, particularly in the pass game against a really productive and prolific passing offense that Toledo has. That's the easy thing to do. The tough thing to do has been to tell some stories and to humanize who these guys are and kind of understand the quest that they are on. When you play so many freshmen, it's hard, and a lot of freshmen at critical spots when you're going up against better and more experienced teams, and being able to adequately convey the process and getting people to understand the process and to want to go along with the process and to invest in who these kids are, so that they can kind of enjoy the ride, as frustrating as it is right now on kind of the ground floor, and it's step 1 for a lot of these guys. So that's been the interesting task over the last few weeks, and it was again tonight. And I think in some ways we did a good job with it. A lot of stuff I wanted to go back and rehash, and we'll see how we do with it next week when the Cardinals go back on the road. But it's been an interesting broadcaster's test from that standpoint over the last 4 or 5 weeks or so. In the meantime, enough about me. You came here to listen to our guest today, and he is the radio voice of Westwood One. Well, not the. He's one of the radio voices for Westwood One coverage and for ESPN coverage as well, high school basketball on ESPN, among other things. Ted Emrich is our guest. Dallas guy. If you are a Texas native listening to this podcast, you might very well know his voice from the Texas Longhorns radio network, where he spent a lot of time. A North Texas graduate and kind of the Bill Mercer School of Broadcasting. He'll touch on a little bit of who Bill is and, the quote-unquote, school that several broadcasters come from and who those guys are. Ted will get into kind of his upbringing in the Dallas media market and the Texas media market, and how he got in on the ground floor with Westwood One, because it's a remarkable story. A lot of people that we've spoken to on this podcast that do work with Westwood One, Ed Cohen, John Sadak, are guys that more traditionally got involved with Westwood One. Ted's story is a little bit wackier, and it starts when he was a teenager and in high school. So he'll get into all of that and much more here on the episode, and he'll also get into who his father is, who is a well-known media and radio personality in Dallas, and also the public address voice of Jerry World. So some interesting kind of introductions to broadcasting for Ted at a very young age. He's a young guy, not even 30 years old. He's done a lot at this point, still very much an up-and-comer in this industry, but at the same point has also worked for, and currently does work for, some pretty big outlets. So it has some pretty interesting stories to tell about where he is, how he's gotten there, what he is, and how he approaches this industry as well. One of the really fun conversations we have had. And I'll tell you on the back end how some of what he has said directly you can apply to what you do currently, and I've already applied in the last couple of weeks to what I do currently in broadcasting. That said, let's jump into it. Ted Emrich of Westwood One and ESPN is our guest this week on PxPCast.
Where do we start? In a galaxy far, far away. Once upon a time. Oh man, it's difficult for me because I always have to go back to childhood, and I don't want to take you through some long and winding tale, Joel. Nobody wants to hear that.
We have all the time in the world.
well, you're in luck. I would be foolish if I didn't say that it started with my dad. He worked in the Dallas-Fort Worth area for 20 plus years for KRLD radio, one of the big news stations. He did sports there, and he was inducted into the Texas Radio Hall of Fame a couple of years ago. Just a wonderful honor, and I am so proud that he's my dad. And just to get the opportunity as a kid, just tagging along with him, that exposed me to this crazy world that we all are trying to make a living in. Now, I went down a different path, definitely split off. My passion was always play-by-play. And what a coincidence that here we are on your show now. But my dad did updates. He did just a little bit of TV here and there, the occasional play-by-play, but still just being in that professional broadcast environment, it ignited something within me. And I was always attracted to sports, the natural drama that we see play out in front of us when we're in the booth. And for me, it was all about play-by-play because I also love words. I love the English language. I love being able to tell stories. And I guess we love to talk too, right? That's another part of it. But putting all of that together and being able to document something in real time, and just the inherent challenge that is there as we try to perform this job week after week, day after day, I loved it. And that's what I set my heart on from an early stage. Getting behind a mic in high school, doing PA. No, it's not play-by-play, but just getting comfortable behind a mic, doing PA for baseball and basketball and whatever else they would throw a 16-year-old's way. And then eventually, going to college and trying to ply my craft at North Texas, which has a long history of churning out broadcasters from the likes of Mark Followell, the Mavericks television voice, former ESPN play-by-play man Dave Barnett, Craig Way, the radio voice of the Texas Longhorns, so on and so forth, George Dunham, Craig Miller. It's a wonderful tradition that they have put together. And I wanted to be a part of that because they've got a TV station, they've got a radio station, you get a chance to do games. And, here we are a few years out past my graduation, and I could not be more fortunate. I couldn't be luckier that I get a chance to do games on the ESPN networks, that I get a chance to do games for Westwood One. And yeah, there are bumps along the way, and you're trying to climb that ladder rung by rung, and it's difficult, and you're screaming to the sky above, wondering when is that break going to come about. But I'm very thankful that I've gotten a few along the way.
I want to break some of that down, but first off, is it weird to go to a Cowboys game and hear your dad?
Yeah, I don't even hear it at the game so much. I hear it through the TV, Joel. That's the crazy thing about it. Yeah, I know when Joe and Troy are doing the Cowboys and Packers a few weeks back, and I just hear that it's a rumble that you hear, first down Cowboys, or coming up for perhaps a big defensive stop, third down. You just hear that bleeding through the TV. It's kind of funny. And his friends will say, "Oh, I heard you on TV." Well, yeah, kind of. But yes, he's invading everybody's space with that booming voice for sure. It's great. I'm so glad that he's been able to do that for the last several years as their PA voice.
Why did the play-by-play bug bite you in particular? If you're around him growing up and you're around what he does and what he saw, what diverted you away from that toward the path that you wanted to take?
I think the live element is a big part of it. I don't think there's any such thing as a perfect broadcast. Certainly those at the very top of what we do have probably had, that grade of 99 out of 100. But I loved reading Al Michaels' book saying there's no perfect game out there. You can get close, but and he's still doing it at his age, and he's still chasing that. And I don't know, the challenge has always grabbed me, whatever it might be, whether it be in a class or just in regular life. And now in this crazy bubble that we're in, calling games for a living. Yeah. What do you want to do for a living? Oh, I want to not just get into the game for free. I want to get to the game, get paid for this, by the way, and talk about what I see. I mean, it's crazy on paper. My wife told me, and I'm glad she didn't say this to me up front, but Kate says that when I first heard what you wanted to do for a living, my thought was, oh, so you want to be an astronaut. It's basically the same thing. It's that pie in the sky dream, right? It's so competitive. It can grind away at your soul as you're trying to catch that break. And but I love it. I love every moment of it. I've loved games, and I've loved storytellers. I've loved the ability to find just the right word, being able to humanize the players, these guys that, we're in football season right now. These guys are wearing helmets. Some of them have visors. The fans, all they care about is, oh man, I love that number 21. I want to know more about 21 besides his name, besides his height and weight, beside his stats, his class, all of that. I want to know that background. I want to know what inspires him. And I want to share that with somebody at home listening or watching. And I want to be I love how Doc Emrich in hockey has put it, being the conduit for what these terrific athletes do on the ice, the field, the court, wherever, and connecting them to the audience at home who has such a passion for this sport. Yeah, they've got their T-shirt on and they're waving their towel or whatever it may be. They're into it, and you can let them know more about what's happening in front of you and humanizing them and telling their stories. Just every part of it I absolutely love.
Your wife thought you were nuts. What'd your dad think when you said, hey, I want to get into this whole field too?
He said, why don't you do something that actually pays something? No, seriously. And right out of college, Joel, the early opportunities for me were in radio, and he encouraged me, now look at TV, look more into TV. But I didn't, while I checked into some of those one-man band type positions.
Sure.
You know, the reporter, you're shooting high school football and it's nonstop and you're getting paid $20,000 a year or whatever it is. I don't know. I was fortunate that I was able to find work on the radio side and close to home, and it still made sense financially. And I always figured, and of course doing play-by-play of high school football on the side while I had my consistent job with the ESPN radio affiliate here in Dallas. And I always thought, well, don't you have to be good first at radio and you can graduate to TV? I studied all the career paths of people that I admire, and I thought, well, okay, the breaks aren't coming at TV. I'm going to focus on radio. I'm going to put everything I have into this, and the TV opportunities will come. It's just, I want to be able to learn how to call a good game on radio before you get into the nuance and the captions of television and complementing the picture in front of you. And that's what I did. And I'm glad that the breaks came on the television side.
For those that don't know who he is or are unaware, you talked about North Texas. Tell people about who Bill Mercer is and what influence he had on you.
They say that I am one of the last members of the Mercer Mafia. That's the fact that he has his own name on the group of broadcasters that he tutored, that he helped produce, that says everything. Bill Mercer is one of the great play-by-play men, and I would say not just in Texas, but of all time. And you could probably also add the tag underrated because he's not a household name. Bill Mercer was the first television voice of the Texas Rangers when they came here in 1972. He also worked with Harry Carey in the same booth with the White Sox. We know about, obviously, Harry's time with the Cardinals and Cubs, but when he was with the White Sox for a brief time, Bill Mercer was his partner. Bill was also the radio voice of the Dallas Cowboys. He worked the Ice Bowl, the Cowboys and Packers. But the funny thing about Bill, his claim to fame for most people might very well be his work in pro wrestling. Yeah. He was the voice of World Class. Yeah, I'm telling you.
He was the voice of World Class?
World Class, that's it. The Von Erichs and the Freebirds, and in the 80s, the Dallas promotion.
I've got to go pull that up on the network now and see. That's crazy.
I'm telling you.
Okay.
Yeah. So, okay, I'm a big fan too.
Yeah.
I've got the network subscription, and it's funny to go back and watch him now on those shows, and he did all of that. And of course, back in the 80s, the most important thing to him was, I'm going to treat this like a sporting event, because then the fans can buy it as such. Yeah, of course, we know, hey, it's entertainment. That's all it is. It's a TV show like anything else. It's Game of Thrones amped up to 11. It's ridiculous, but it's fun. But he treated it like it was serious, like it was hand-to-hand combat. It's one-on-one, and this is a sporting event. And he lent credibility to it as a result. But all the while, as he's making his way in this career, of course, he was the voice of North Texas as well. But he started the radio and television broadcast program at North Texas, starting that from the ground floor. And like I said, the names that have come through are just off the charts. People that have gone to a network level, like Dave Barnett and Craig Way, Mark Followell, and so on and so forth. There are so many names, and I happen to be the one to be in his final class before he retired in 2007. And I was so glad that he waited one more year so I could show up and amble into his classroom. But he is a teacher of the highest order. The assignment was simple. In his sportscasting class, you had to call a game every week. That was it. That's all you had to do. During the fall, a football game, but there was one rule. And when I was in his class, cassette tapes were still in existence. Uh-huh. So I bring the recorder out, and you're at the top of the stands You couldn't, even if there was an empty booth available at the high school stadium, you had to be in the stands, and he would know he's listening for crowd noise and crowd noise around you. And the thinking was, if you can battle through that distraction. I remember one game where I've got the cassette recorder and I've got my little binder with my boards in front of me, and the Vuvuzela was just coming into prominence, and somebody was blowing that right in my ear, and I just tried to block that out, and it was a sellout crowd full. Hey, what am I going to do? Hey, stop this! I'm using my tape recorder. Hey, I'm calling this game in the tape recorder.
Yeah, for who?
Please.
Yeah,
yeah, right.
Yeah, exactly.
Hey, no, for the Bill Mercer Broadcasting Network. Exactly. But no, if you can fight through that, you can absolutely deal with all the comforts of a broadcast booth and everything at your disposal. Oh, they feed you before they have game notes and this and that. You deal with all of these distractions, and then you can move forward. So it was great fun to be able to do that in a class environment and get graded for it. He helped me in so many ways.
And then your big break came at 20, right?
Yeah, that's it. I was going into my senior year at North Texas, and the University of Texas had an opening on their broadcast team. They were looking for a studio anchor. Of course, they're an IMG school, and there was talk of them just filling things in-house in Winston-Salem, and I'm so glad they didn't. Craig Way went to bat for me. And I think the way the story goes, Craig has told me that they gather everybody and say, hey, okay, so Craig, you have someone in mind? And he says, yeah, I think he's, 23 or something. And I was 20 years old at the time, and I was still in college. And again, just to be in a network environment, and for one of the biggest networks at the college level, I mean, the UT brand speaks for itself, and for a guy that I admire so much in Craig, I mean, that was a thrill, and I'm just trying to live up to it. I just want to prove him right, and I don't want to let him down, and I was able to be in the studio for football and men's basketball for 8 years. It was great fun.
How'd that first year go at 20?
Yeah, the first game was rough, and it taught me a lesson though, Joel. You and we all deal with this. That one game, the tape that you just want to burn, you just want to move on, and that's all you can do. You can't let that one mistake, that one stumble lead to another, because you're losing your concentration and you're seeing red. And, how can you mess up there? You're better than that. And then, that's stuff happens over the course of a game. Like I said, nobody's perfect, but you just want to minimize those mistakes and keep your concentration for as long as possible. And there are so many moving parts, in a scoreboard report and a highlight segment in a game, when there are 22 people on the field or 10 on the court, and okay, you misspeak, whatever, beg your pardon, you move on. That's all you can do. But yeah, I'm glad they continue to show faith in me and let me improve as the season went along, and I felt like I got pretty good at it by the end of it.
And then you started doing stuff at ESPN Dallas too, correct?
That's right. I didn't get a full-time job until I was 4 years out of college. I was part-time, thankfully, with a lot of hours. It was more than just the 20 hours a week. I was glad to get the work, even if there were no benefits attached. But, you're waking up at 3:45 in the morning, going in for a 5 to 11 shift. I did the local sports centers during Mike and Mike. And then when we were running Colin Cowherd before his move to Fox, that was the steady work while I tried to chase this play-by-play dream on the side, doing high school football on Friday nights and high school basketball and whatever other opportunity would come my way. It's just that's how you climb. That's how you try to move up.
How'd that stuff informed the play-by-play side of things with you too, and getting that different experience in different mediums, for lack of a better word?
Yeah, no, everything helps. Every rep, no matter what it is, even if I'm just doing a 1 minute sportscast, that helps. Yeah, it's obviously totally different from play-by-play. There's no script. There's no plan. I definitely by the end of the run at ESPN Radio, I was done with it. I was ready to move on. I was glad I was getting more play-by-play work, but at that stage, right out of college, you need reps no matter how they come, no matter how many people are listening. And, when you're doing McKinney ISD high school football on 97.5 KLAK, which is what I did for the first 5 years as the side gig for, 150 a game, and setting up the equipment and engineering and doing all the stuff that we all have to do when we try to get into this, that's going to help no matter what the experience is. And so, yeah, it's all worthwhile.
There's great stories, I feel like, with a lot of guys with Howie Deneroff in terms of sometimes how he discovers people. And, he's, I don't want to say notorious, but famous for wherever he is turning on the radio and seeing what he can find. And Kevin Kugler kind of case in point with that. How did you wind up on Howie Deneroff's plate and ingrain yourself at Westwood One?
It started when I was in high school.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. The other part of my story, as funny as that sounds, my story, it also starts not just with my dad, but also with spotting. That's how I got my start, really, in professional booths.
Interesting.
That partially started with my dad. He would do high school playoff games on the Texas State Network on radio. But eventually, a friend of a friend who knew Howie and knew that I was spotting, knew that he was looking for a spotter. Again, I'm a junior in high school. And it was for a Thursday night college football game, TCU and Louisville in Fort Worth. Chuck Cooperstein did the game. And Howie calls the house, leaves a voicemail. I call him back. And he goes through the usual checklist of, okay, you got your pass, you know where you're going, you're working with Chuck, all the usual things. Basically, you're ready to go. It's what producers and people at the higher level do for crews the week of a game, checking in to make sure that this person exists and he's going to show up. And so after all of that, we're winding down the conversation, and Howie says, "Oh, one last thing, Ted. I heard on your voicemail, the message, it said," and this is funny, right? Back in the day of voicemails, not just on your cell phone, but the home phone. He says, it said Roger, Chris, and Teddy Emrich. Do you still live with your parents? And I say, yeah, Howie, I'm a junior in high school. I'm 16 years old. And Howie says, "Have you ever done this before?" And I actually had. I'd been doing it for the last few years, going back to middle school even, for my dad and some of his friends who did games. And I told him I had. I know exactly what I'm looking for. He says, "Okay, just be sure before you point. Just be sure before you point." It's sage advice, very important for any spotter. And I worked for Chuck that night. It was a fun game and got good reviews. And all of a sudden, I became one of their spotters for any broadcasts that were in the Dallas area. Anytime there was a Cowboys game on a Sunday afternoon or even Sunday night, I would spot for Dave Sims. I would spot for Harry Callis, the late, great Harry Callis, when he was a part of Westwood One's NFL roster. I even got to spot for Marv Albert a few times. He usually had a regular guy, as he's had for many years. Excuse me. But when when that person wasn't available one night, it was 2006. It happened. I'll never forget it because it was Tony Romo's first game. Bill Parcells pulled Drew Bledsoe at the half. Romo comes in. He throws 3 interceptions in the second half, and the Giants beat them. But I remember Marv and Boomer Esiason being there, and Marv, before the game, I meet with Marv, and everything's good there. And Boomer comes into the booth, and Marv turns to him, and I'm going to do my horrible Marv Albert impersonation. I'm sure many people do this on the podcast, Joel. But Boomer, meet our spotter here tonight. His name is Ted Emrich. He has received glowing reviews from one Howard Deneroff.
That's not bad. That was not
okay.
Yeah.
It's okay. I'm working on it. I'm still workshopping it.
Martucci's was good, so it's a high bar.
And Boomer has one thing to say to me. He says, "Oh, hey, how are you? Don't F up tonight." So that was fun. I was in college at that point. I was a sophomore in college, but I got to travel on the road a few times and spot for Marv. And when he got the gig at CBS to do NFL games every week, he called me, and I had to turn him down. He wanted me to be his regular spotter. And I had to turn him down because I was getting so much work on the side. I was, part of the Texas broadcast. And, of course, he'd have to fly out on Saturday for a Sunday game. I couldn't do that. And I couldn't commit to that. And I told him how much I appreciated that offer. But, my goal is not to be a spotter in an NFL booth. It's to call those NFL games in an NFL booth. So but I always enjoyed that time spotting for the likes of Marv Albert. I spotted for Spiro Dedes when he first started with CBS, when he just had a handful of games. Of course, now he's doing games every week and doing wonderful work for CBS. But no, that was a fun time, just being in that environment. It was like being in the lab, in a college class, and watching the very best work and the dynamics between the announcers and the truck and all the communication that goes on. We know that TV, it's a totally different animal from radio. And it's like an orchestra, while, it's almost a solo performance on radio. So it was just fun to be exposed to that and learn more and more each time out.
I was going to say, what did you learn from being able to watch? And I guess in particular, too, on the radio side, because you can listen at home to a radio broadcaster and
Sure.
become better. But I still enjoy going into a radio booth and sitting there and watching somebody do a game on radio. I think it's really informative. What did you learn, and how do you think you got better just from being around those guys and in those positions?
Even when I wasn't working, there was one time, the first ever Monday night game at AT&T Stadium. The Cowboys played the Panthers in 2009. Kevin Harlan, of course, the voice of Monday Night Football at this point. For some reason, Westwood One still hired me for that game. But Kevin Harlan, as many people know in our line of work, he does not use a spotter. And just that to itself is incredible, how he can do that and how he can still identify everybody on defense. We can all pretty much handle what's happening offensively. We can follow the ball. But how he is able to point out that a defense is in the nickel and it's a 3-man front and provides all the level of description that he does is mind-blowing. But they still hired me for this game. And they said, you know what, we'll still pay you. Just come out and watch. I said, okay. I get to watch the master at work. And just how he deals with Howie, the communication back and forth with announcer and producer, announcer and announcer with analyst, Kevin working with Boomer, and just seeing that. But, obviously during the break, and how they're going to set things up in the future. Where they might want to take this broadcast if it gets out of hand. And just also seeing watching Kevin's head, to be honest, the lack of a better term, watching where he's looking. The booth at AT&T is terrible for not just national radio, but for home and visiting. It's in the corner of the stadium, and this is a trend that we're seeing. You know it very well. Anywhere you show up, you're praising on high if you have a booth at the 50-yard line these days. That's how it is. But seeing Kevin go from the field and he looks up at the monitor. And that's okay because it's the better view. And, for so long, you have to watch the field no matter what. Don't call a game off of TV. That was one of Bill Mercer's rules. You call the game however you can. That's the other point. And, just to be able to watch the virtuoso Kevin Harlan was wonderful. And that happened every time out. Getting to I remember spotting for Kevin Kugler on Texas OU 10 years ago, 2007. DeMarco Murray had a big game for Oklahoma. Kevin was just getting into every week work with Westwood One at the college level, and you could see right then. I mean, this guy is great. It was him and Terry Bowden at the time. I loved being able to, and I just wanted to do them a good job. That's all I wanted to do. I wanted to make sure that I was their extra set of eyes, and whether it be word choice, whether it be cadence. And yeah, you're right. A lot of it you can hear on the radio yourself, but also getting a look at their boards, seeing how they put things together. What's important to them? What pieces of information? What are they highlighting? That's stuff that you can tuck away, and stuff that you only glean if you're there and working and watching it firsthand.
I know you did some reporting for Westwood as well. When did you make that jump from being their spotter extraordinaire to having some opportunities on air?
I always sent Howie a tape every year, going back to college. And like you say, Howie is always listening. It might take him a few months because the man doesn't sleep. And I've seen that in action. I don't know how he does it. I mean, he will get back. If he's up, there will be texts at 3 a.m. He will send you emails at 2 a.m, whatever it may be. And that's why I admire him so much. But he would always get back to me. He would always offer constructive criticism. And that's what I always appreciated. Feedback. That's what we're looking for. Not just trying to make connections. While that's important too, the networking element, but we want to get better. And that was number one for me. I wasn't dreaming of getting on with Westwood One yet. And yet in 2012, leading into the London Olympics, Howie and Mike Eby, his right-hand man, along with Larry Costigan, they get in touch with me and tell me that, hey, there's an opening. Would you like it? It's a reporter/producer position. You'll cover a few events. You'll do a few interviews. You will report here and there for our short form updates that go to all the affiliates. But, primarily you'll be a producer and you'll be cutting sound. And I don't care. I don't care what it paid, but just to get Westwood One on-air experience, I jumped at it. And it turned out that after the first couple of days, I wasn't editing sound anymore, and I was just covering events. And so I must have done something right, and I'm glad I did, because that was so much fun, being able to ride the tube from event to event, venue to venue, being at Wimbledon one day and talking with Serena and Venus after a doubles victory, and then going to archery and learning more about Brady Ellison, who won a medal in London. There all these stories, filling in on basketball and interviewing Kobe Bryant and Kevin Love after a Team USA victory. Just great experience all the way around. And I kept sending Howie tapes, and eventually I got my first game in 2015. Clemson blew out Miami. It was the worst loss in the history of the U. Al Golden was fired the day after. So obviously I brought good luck to South Florida, but I'm glad that, it's led to pretty consistent work and doing football and doing basketball and the Olympics and doing track and field in Rio. That was a great thrill. So I'm very fortunate.
What's the pressure of that? We had Pat Keenis on a while back, and we talked about the pressure of doing swimming at the Olympics and having to nail the highlight moment. And when you're on one of those feature sports like a track and field, I mean, what are those conversations like as far as listen, when this person wins, it's got to be good because it's got to be playable for the next 4 years.
You can't stumble with Usain Bolt in his last Olympics.
Correct. Yeah.
That would not sound good. I mean, that's it. You're boiling down to 10 seconds in the 100 meters. To the final 50 meters, and Michael Phelps. Is this his last medal? Is it last Olympic medal? And then eventually you just say, you know what? You're going to have fun with this. There's one person who has this opportunity for this network, for this country, and you have the chance to nail it. And, oh, by the way, it's a sport that you have never done before. I would have loved to have told them an Al Michaels style white lie of, oh, yeah, I've done lots of hockey games, leading up to Lake Placid for him. I've done track and field like here in Dallas all the time. You can count on me. No, of course not. And so you're hunkered down all summer, watching YouTube videos and turning the sound down and trying to call it and learning the mechanics. There wasn't much of a template to go off of, even from 2012. I will say Kevin Kugler did fill in on track and field one night, and he did a spectacular job because Kevin can call, tiddlywinks, and it would sound amazing. And so just to get a rudimentary form of mechanics down of leading into the blocks, and then I just tried to create my own palette with strong action verbs and the timing of things and when to work in. My analyst, Carol Lewis, who was just a total joy to work with. She was a star, and, she had done this obviously for NBC for many years, and getting a chance to do it on radio with her, just wonderful. And then you just try to nail it. And you can't script it any better with Bolt going out the way he did. And of course, there were many, many American stories as well. And, it was every morning, it was every night, and you're not sleeping. And that's what's fun about it, because you're just going right back to Olympic Stadium and seeing what kind of history will transpire today. Had a blast.
When it comes to the actual, you use the word action, you said the strongest action verbs you could think of. And I just remembered back at the very beginning where you talked about how much you love language and the artistry of this profession along those lines. What kind of, I don't know if this is the right way to phrase it, what kind of preparation have you done over your career in terms of that? I know a lot of people say like they'll sit down and read the dictionary, or they'll write out different ways to describe things. What was kind of your study of language for this, and coming up with the best, but at the same time most digestible palette of words that you can use?
Right, because you don't want to go too far above somebody's head. I mean, technically in the thesaurus, this word might be a synonym for this, but do we actually use it in everyday language? That's a great point.
Yeah, then you end up with the Joey letter on Friends, trying to get the adoption.
I never found Friends that funny when it was on, but I love it now on Netflix. I think it's great. No, you're right. You have to strike that balance. I mean, it starts with me growing up, and listen, this is a common tale, right? Going to sleep with the little transistor radio, the earbuds in your ear, and listening to someone that you enjoy. At the local level here, a guy like Eric Nadel, inducted into Cooperstown recently. His ability to describe and paint that picture, you can't say enough about it. Brad Sham and his ability to capture the moment with the Cowboys at a national level. There's so many that I admire. Ian Eagle is one of my favorites, and I know he's one of many favorites, but just his use of action verbs. I mentioned Doc Emrich as well, the glossary of terms. It seems like it never ends. I loved that what was it, Deadspin or somebody put out, actually charted the different words he used for one NHL game, from waffle boarded to shuffled and so on. It's incredible. And you start to, as you listen and you take those words in, you think, well, could this work in this sport? And that's what I try to do with, not just track and field, a simple running. If I'm saying running or sprinting the whole time, people are going to get really tired of that. They're going to be bored quick because what are we doing? That's all we're doing. We're running around in a circle, an oblong circle. That's all we're doing. He runs to the finish line. No, that's not going to work. Give me something more. He breezes. Usain Bolt. He's great at breezing. Let me tell you, especially in the final few meters when he's won the race. Halfway through, he's great at breezing. Stuff like that. Just to change it up. And I've always challenged myself. And again, not to the point of making the listener cringe. That just sounds weird. That word doesn't work. But still varying it up, and I don't want to lean on that crutch word too much. None of us do in this line of work, but I always, that's why we listen back, right? That's why we're our own worst critics. And oh man, I said this too much. I said fire too much. This quarterback, he fired it over the middle. I said fire too much. Okay, what else works? He guns it, he rifles it, he wires it, he drills it. Just and trying to ingrain those in my head and remember for next time. That's what it's about.
What do you listen back for beyond word choice? What catches your eye? What's most important when you sit down with a tape of yours?
I'm certainly listening for mechanics, first of all. Did I give the score enough? And trying to adhere to the old Bill Mercer rule. It's not just Bill's rule, but that's where I heard it. Every first down, every change of possession. Now, we know in today's game, and especially in college football, sometimes that is just impossible. When teams get in the hurry up, you fit it in when you can. But when they're at warp speed, you have to call the play. That's number one, of course. But down in distance, yard line, setting the formation as best as you can, of course, with the up tempo, giving the score, and word choice, cadence. I'm listening for the other thing that Bill was big on was the edge of emotion, especially a drive that maybe lasted 15 plays, and trying to reach that crescendo by the time that they're in scoring position, when they're in the red zone, and being able to communicate the right amount of drama. And not everything is the Super Bowl. Don't mistake that. Not getting excited for every single first down and every single 10-yard play, whatever it may be, but just trying to match the energy of the moment. If it's a big third down stop early in the game, for a team that's coming off a 3-game losing streak and they were booed at home the week before, okay, match that. That's big. But, if it's 2 1-5 teams or whatever it may be, just trying to match the tenor of the game. And, lately I'm also listening for a natural sound. Something that I'm trying to work on is being more conversational. I think we're all trying to do that. And as a guy who never really did baseball and has focused on football and basketball and these Olympic sports and other opportunities, baseball obviously challenges you the most to be conversational, to, hey, just pull up a chair and talking to a buddy of yours as you're calling the game. Football and basketball have a lot more energy, I would think, ingrained in them just because of the pace of play. And so I don't want to sound like Mr. Announcer voice all the time and blah, blah, you want to be you. And I know that's probably the most hackneyed thing that anybody has said on this podcast, but it's hard to find that. It's hard to find who am I? Who are you? That's what I always laughed at when you got to be yourself. Who am I? and it takes time to figure that out. It takes multiple games. It takes seasons to figure that out. And eventually you're able to strike that chord, and you're not in the mode of, well, I'm an announcer doing this game. No, you're not what's the I'm blanking here. The Hank Azaria character on IFC. Have you seen that show?
I haven't.
I'm terrible. I really am. Longmire, Brockmire. That's it. Oh my gosh. I mean, it's hilarious, but it's all the cliches of big time baseball announcer voice. And let me tell you something, it's just, but to be honest, you can still hear that on some broadcasts.
Sure.
And you know what? For some audiences, I love him. Some audiences love that. They eat it up. That's great. A natural sound is the other thing I'm trying to listen for.
You bounce back and forth, obviously, between television and radio as well. What do you find most challenging about that, and being able to shift gears in your own head as far as which medium you're on, and kind of remembering which one you're on, and being able to bounce back and forth effectively?
Yeah, I'm still trying to find that balance. I'm still trying to get better at that, to be honest with you. I go back to Ian Eagle, and I marvel at his ability to do it every single week, doing Thursday night football on Westwood One, and of course doing the NFL on TV on CBS every Sunday.
Yeah.
And that's remarkable. But for me, doing college and high school basketball on ESPN, that's I'm going into my third season now, and I feel like I'm just starting to get it. I felt much more comfortable in my second year compared to my first. I mean, I'm just trying to find myself. That first year, I think anybody would tell you that when they get a break like that, a massive jump in their career. But now I feel like I'm starting to understand it, and how I can set the ball on the tee for the analyst, and how I can talk to pictures, and how I can speak with the producer and have that voice, and hey, we can go here. Hey, remember this, we got this story, we got this graphic, and all of that. And now all of a sudden, you're not just a spectator who happens to talk. You're on the sideline, if you will. Obviously, you're still playing a critical role, but now you can have that producer's mindset, while obviously following where the producer and the director are going, but have a voice in the proceedings, and being able to help direct the flow of conversation. I feel like I've gotten much better at that, and we know the basic dynamic between radio and TV, providing every level of description on radio, and painting that whole picture, theater of the mind, and so on. And with TV, I feel like I'm now able to best complement the pictures that are in front of the viewer at home.
Where'd the slinky come into play?
So this was during, and by the way, I absolutely love doing the high school basketball package on the ESPN networks, mainly, of course, on ESPNU. I know what I have to live up to there with the likes of Mike Cousins and Adam Amin and Justin Kutcher and everybody, Joe Davis, who has preceded me there. I want to live up to that. And I know what it's done for their careers, and I hope to be good enough to be next in line to move forward. But you get to have a lot of fun. Why are people tuning in? They want to see who's next. They want to see who the next NBA star could very well be. And it's not all about the coaches. It's not all about, I'll be honest, the teams even, like you see in the college game. It's about these individuals. And you have a freedom to relax a little bit. And I love our crew Lori Mancini, our producer, Neil Gallo, our director, Russ Winham on graphics, among many other things. But Lori just has these crazy ideas, and I love every one of them. One of the schools that we did last year during our big event in mid-January, Hoop Hall at the Basketball Hall of Fame in Springfield, Massachusetts, one of the schools involved had a famous alum who invented the slinky. And so we thought, as we're going to show that graphic of, famous alumni from the West Town School, well, yeah, somebody who designed the slinky. And so here we are at the table. Paul Biancardi and I were playing with the slinky, and Jeff Goodman was our reporter for this broadcast. And we go to him, and he's trying to set up the old slinky bit of going down the stairs. He's off to the side of the stands, and he's trying to get it down, and it's not cooperating. The slinky is not cooperating. And I say that's a SportsCenter not top 10 nominee. I mean, the slinky just would not go down for Jeff. But you have a chance to have fun. We caught fish in Seattle for a game. We went to the market, and we caught the fish, just like those great workers that you see all the time in Seattle that they do. So you really get to let your hair down with those games, and you're just trying to find creative ways to present the town that you're in, the teams, the individuals. And so we just say, hey, forget it, let's have some fun. And that's what we do.
That's like Kevin Brown a couple of weeks ago. We were talking about high school football, and he mentioned
absolutely
they had him run a 40-yard dash against a kid who ran like a 4.3.
I saw it.
Yeah,
that's a great idea. It's a great. I mean, that's the thing. That's the challenge to us at ESPN on a yearly basis. Trust me, they tell us this. Find a way to stand out. Be creative in your storytelling. Not just showing the graphic that, oh, this guy can run a 4.3. Well, let's demonstrate that. And better yet, let's put Kevin out there. That'd be fun.
Yeah.
Why not? That's when you have a kid on the basketball side of things, the wingspan is 9 feet or whatever it is. Well, demonstrate that, and that's what we did at the Jordan Brand Classic. Quint Kesenick was on the sidelines. Okay, let's have Quint's wingspan, and let's have this top prospect's wingspan side to side. That's how you show a viewer at home. That demonstrate it for me. It's fun.
Who thinks of that stuff, and how do you find yourself thinking differently now, maybe looking for stuff like that?
That was the challenge at first. Like when you're working games for ESPN, of course the producer is always going to check in, and usually if it's not the high school package for me, it's going to be a different producer every time out working college games.
Sure.
There's not. While my partner might remain the same on college, last year was Malcolm Huckabee. On the American Conference, we're usually going to have a different producer every time out, and they're going to check in and say, hey, any ideas for the game? That first year, I'm thinking, well, what does he expect? I mean, doesn't the producer and the director, don't they come up with stuff? I can execute. Hey, put me in, coach. I can run the play as it is called. But now, as I've gotten more comfortable, as I've had more reps, as I've been around this, I'll be honest. When I got my break with ESPN, I still feel like a TV novice. I'll be honest. But at the time, I was absolutely a TV novice. I had done just a handful of games, and I'd sent them a tape, just thinking, well, what can it hurt? And they liked what they saw, and they hired me. Sometimes that's how it happens. And I've been racing ever since to improve, and again, to try to prove them right, to make sure that I don't just flop and, some flash in the pan. And I feel like I have. I feel like I've gotten to the point now, okay, I can contribute. Let's think of different ways. Okay, in the American Conference, okay, a UCF game is coming up, Central Florida, Taco Fall. What can we do? Let's show a handshake. Let's show him absolutely swallowing my hand or somebody else's hand to demonstrate. Again, same thing as the wingspan or 40-yard dash or something else, but it's another creative way. Let's show this picture of him shaking somebody's hand. That's a great full screen. And it's another way to tell that story instead of just saying it, which of course we know is all you can do on radio. How do we show it? And how do we cut through to reach that viewer to get them to care even more about this game? Maybe they just stumbled onto the game, flipping through. Oh, what's this? Oh, Taco. Oh man, is he tall? 7 feet 6 inches. Oh, tell me more about him. And then, a timeout or whatever, a foul called. Now, let's show you more about Taco Fawn. Here's how big his hand is. Just little stuff like that. And so it gets the creative juices flowing.
All right, that's Ted Emrich here on Play-by-Playcast. And as promised, how you can apply what Ted just said to your broadcast and how I applied it to my broadcasts already. We talked about the slinky. And, I asked that question kind of in jest. His Twitter bio says, yes, in my picture, that is me playing with a slinky. So I was just kind of curious. I was like, hey, man, where's the slinky come into play? But the explanation of, Jeff Goodman trying to get the slinky to go down the stairs and using that as an explanation and a different way to tell a story of what high school they were broadcasting a game at, I thought was interesting. And it got me thinking. And Kevin Brown running the 40-yard dash on camera that we talked about on this episode and a couple of weeks ago with KB got me thinking. And I think when we all do television broadcasts, the more creative we can be in storytelling like that, the better. So in my particular instance, the last women's volleyball game I did for Ball State last week, Ball State on the volleyball court is a very big physical team at the net. A lot of tall girls, powerful ladies that can really get up there and hit the volleyball and hit it hard. And I had been having a conversation with one of them, her name is Ellie Dunn, a couple of weeks ago about how hard she hits a volleyball and what it's like to try to dig a ball that she attacks. And she didn't know how hard she hit it, but she's had her friends tell her, what it feels like to try to dig a ball that she makes contact with. So on our last volleyball broadcast last week, we actually went to practice and clocked both Ellie and another young lady by the name of Kaya Holder, who hits it pretty hard. We clocked them. We took a radar gun to some balls that they were attacking and showed the radar gun on camera and then came back live. And our sideline reporter was in the stands with a radar gun as well, and he had been clocking speeds throughout the night. So we kind of had practice speeds of, what it's like when they hit the ball in practice and, when they're tired and they don't have adrenaline pumping for the game. We got that speed, but then we also got in-game speeds, which were faster. And it was just a different and unique way to say Ellie Dunn and Kyle Holder hit the ball hard and Ball State is physical. We broke out the radar gun, we had a prop, and we just had a different way to talk about something. And Ted Emrich and the Slinky got me thinking about things like that. So I haven't really thought about how to apply that to radio, but certainly when it comes to television, if you're a television broadcaster, ways to think outside the box. It's kind of neat. Also for that broadcast, it was Ball State versus Bowling Green. Bowling Green's head coach had just become a U.S. citizen. So we took a couple of the practice questions from the U.S. citizenship test, and we threw them up on the screen and saw how we all did. Thought that was an interesting way to tell a story. Bowling Green had a pair of, not identical twins, but paternal twins on their team, and they still looked fairly similar to each other, so we put them side by side with no names, and we didn't actually get to it on the air, but it was one of those things that, if they had become a factor in the matchup, or the match had gotten totally out of hand and we had time for it, thought it would have been fun to try to figure out which twin was which. So different ways to tell stories and to highlight who people are comes from just a slinky in a picture that Ted was playing with on Twitter. It got me thinking, and it's going to keep me thinking, certainly, throughout the course of basketball seasons going forward as well. So hopefully it helps get you guys all thinking to be as creative as we can be in telling stories on television. It was one of the last things I asked Ted about, but it was a lot of the stuff he said stuck with me, but it was the one absolute thing that stuck with me in the immediate and that I really jumped on, and I'm excited to keep jumping on here going forward. All right, that does it, though, for us here on this episode. We are out of time, and we do have to say goodbye, but we hope you've enjoyed this. If you did enjoy it, please do leave a rating or a review and throw some stars our way. It just lets me know that people are out there listening to the podcast and are enjoying the podcast, and then it helps in the ratings on iTunes as well. So if you've enjoyed the pod so far and you're still listening, please do take the time to throw a rating and or a review, some stars our way. And we will see you back here next week for another episode of PxPCast. Until then, we are out.
And that will do it from St. Louis, where the score is inconclusive.